The first time my husband said the baby wasn't mine, he didn't raise his voice. He said it quietly, almost gently, like he was commenting on the weather or reminding me to buy milk on the way home. We were standing in the kitchen, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds, dust floating in the air like it always did at that hour. I remember the smell of coffee gone cold in my mug, the hum of the refrigerator, the way my hand instinctively went to my stomach as if my body already knew something my heart hadn't caught up to yet. That baby, he said, not looking at me, isn't mine. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. I laughed. A short, confused sound that didn't belong to me. What? I asked. What are you talking about? He finally turned around then. His face was tight, controlled, like he'd rehearsed this in the car before coming inside. His jaw worked back and forth, a habit he had when he was nervous or lying, though I wouldn't admit that to myself until much later. I've been thinking, he said, and the timing doesn't add up. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had taken a step closer. I was 8 months pregnant. My feet were swollen, my back ached constantly, and every night I slept with a pillow wedged under my belly just to find some kind of comfort. I had built my days around this baby doctor's appointments, tiny folded clothes, the gentle rhythm of kicks that reassured me everything inside was still moving, still alive, and here was my husband, standing 10 feet away, telling me the child growing inside me wasn't his. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked him to sit down. That's how our marriage began to crack, not with shouting, not with plates breaking against walls, but with a quiet accusation spoken between the sink and the stove, while the world outside went on like nothing had changed. Before that moment, our life had been ordinary, not perfect, but solid in the way you come to rely on. We'd been married for 11 years. We met in our late 20s, both a little bruised from previous relationships, both saying we wanted something steady. He worked in logistics for a regional shipping company. I was a high school counselor, long days, emotional work, but the kind that made me feel useful. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on a quiet street where people waved but didn't pry. Every Saturday morning, he made pancakes, flipping them with exaggerated confidence, even though half the time they came out uneven or burnt. I teased him about it. He pretended not to care. These were the small rituals that stitched our life together. For a long time, it was just the two of us. We talked about children in that vague someday way after the next promotion, after the house felt more settled, after we traveled a little more. When we finally decided to try, it wasn't dramatic. It was practical. A decision made over dinner, between bites of roasted chicken and steamed vegetables. When I got pregnant, he smiled and hugged me. He told his parents. He painted the spare room a soft, neutral color because he said he didn't want to jinx anything. He came with me to the first ultrasound and squeezed my hand when we heard the heartbeat, his eyes shining in a way that made me believe, truly believe, we were in this together. Looking back now, I can see the cracks starting to form, thin as hairlines in glass. But at the time, I explained everything away. He started working later hours. End of quarter, he said. You know how it is. When I asked why he'd stopped touching my belly at night, he said he was afraid of hurting the baby. When he stopped coming to appointments, he blamed meetings he couldn't reschedule. I told myself he was stressed. Men got weird during pregnancies, didn't they? That's what people said. I focused on my own body, the way it was changing faster than my mind could keep up with. I focused on the baby's kicks, strong and insistent, like reminders that something good was still happening. The first real clue came at my baby shower. It was a small gathering, my sister, a few close friends, some coworkers. Pink and yellow balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and someone had baked a cake that was a little too sweet. My husband arrived late, his smile strained. his eyes darting around the room as if he were looking for someone who wasn't there. When my friend Lisa jokingly asked if he was ready to be a dad, he laughed too loudly and said, "We'll see." It was a strange thing to say. Everyone chuckled, assuming it was a joke, but something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I caught his eye across the room, silently asking what that meant. He looked away that night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet except for the ticking clock in the hallway. I asked him about it. "You embarrassed me," I said gently. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged, pulling off his shoes. "I was kidding. You're too sensitive lately." I apologized. I hated that about myself, that reflex to smooth things over, to take blame even when something fell off. Pregnancy had made me emotional, everyone said. Hormones. I swallowed my unease and told myself not to make problems where there weren't any, but the unease stayed. It crept into the corners of my days, into the way he guarded his phone, into the way he flinched when I talked about names, into the silence that stretched between us at night, heavy and unspoken. Then came the day in the kitchen. The accusation. The words that split my world in two. When he finally said it out loud, that the baby wasn't his, I felt something inside me go cold and sharp all at once. "How could you even think that?" I asked him. My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from another room. "I just need to be sure," he said. "A DNA test. That's all I'm asking." "Sure. Of what exactly?" I agreed to the test, not because I doubted myself, but because I believed truth had a way of settling things. I believed that once the facts were laid bare, the man I married would look at me ashamed and apologize for ever questioning me. I didn't yet understand that the test wasn't about the baby at all. It was about something much bigger he was desperate to keep hidden. Asterisk. The days between agreeing to the DNA test and actually taking it stretched longer than they should have. Every morning, I woke up with the same dull ache in my chest, the same heavy awareness that something had shifted between us and might never settle back into place. My husband moved through the house like a guest, polite, distant, careful not to touch anything that belonged to me. He slept on the edge of the bed, his back turned, a thin line of space separating us that felt wider than the room itself. I tried to keep our routines intact. I still packed his lunch, still folded his shirts the way he liked, smoothing the creases with my palms. There was a strange comfort in these small, familiar actions, like if I performed them well enough, they might anchor us to who we'd been before. But nothing felt the same. The night before the test, I stood in the nursery alone. The walls were painted a soft gray, chosen because we'd agreed it worked for any future we hadn't fully imagined yet. The crib sat assembled in the corner, the mattress bare except for a fitted sheet. I ran my hand along the rail, my fingers lingering on the smooth wood, and tried to breathe past the knot in my throat. "I know who you belong to," I whispered, my voice breaking despite my efforts. The baby kicked a firm, reassuring thump that made me smile through tears. At the clinic the next morning, everything smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. The nurse spoke kindly, explaining the process as if this were an ordinary appointment. I watched my husband from the corner of my eye as the samples were taken. He avoided my gaze, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders stiff. On the drive home, he turned on the radio too loud. Some talk show droned on about politics, filling the silence neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I stared out the window, counting red lights, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. "They'll call in about a week," he said, finally. "Maybe 2. I nodded. Okay. That was all we said about it. In the days that followed, my mother called more often. She had that sixth sense, the one mothers seem to develop when something is wrong. I kept my answers vague, told her I was tired, that work had been stressful. I wasn't ready to explain. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans pocket. A restaurant bill dated 3 weeks earlier for 2 people. I stared at it longer than I should have. He had told me he was working late that night. I remembered because I'd eaten cereal for dinner and gone to bed early, my back aching too much to cook for one. When I asked him about it, he didn't hesitate. Client dinner, he said. You know how it is. Client dinner, he said. You know how it is? I wanted to believe him. I needed to. So I let the receipt fall back into the pocket and told myself I was being paranoid, that the call came on a Thursday morning. I was at work, in my small office off the counseling wing, when my phone vibrated on the desk. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Double quotes Mrs. Carter. A woman's voice asked, yes. This is the lab calling with your paternity test results. Is now a good time to talk? I closed my door. My hands were shaking. Yes, there's no evidence of non-paternity, she said, reading from a script. The probability that your husband is the biological father is 99.9%. I pressed my hand to my mouth, relief flooding through me so fast it made me dizzy. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, letting the truth settle in my bones. I was right. I had always been right. The baby was his. This nightmare could end now. I called him immediately. They called, I said when he answered. The results are in. There was a pause on the line, just long enough to feel intentional. And? He asked. You're the father, I said, unable to keep the tremor out of my voice. There was never any doubt. He didn't say anything. Did you hear me? I asked. Yes, he said slowly. I hear you. I waited for the apology, for the relief, for the remorse that would tell me he understood how deeply he'd hurt me. Instead, he said, we'll talk tonight. The rest of the day passed in a blur. When I got home, he was already there, sitting at the kitchen table, his hands folded in front of him like he was waiting for a meeting to start. The room felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. Well, I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle on my face. You were wrong. I know, he said. I pulled up the chair across from him and sat down. I need you to tell me why you thought that. I need you to tell me you're sorry. He looked up then, really looked at me, and something in his eyes made my stomach drop. There's something you need to know, he said. My heart began to pound. About what? About why I questioned it in the first place. I waited. I've been involved with someone else, he said. The words came out flat, rehearsed. For about a year. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. You're telling me this now? I asked, after everything. I thought the baby might not be mine, he said, as if that explained it. I thought maybe what? I snapped. That I'd been doing the same thing you were? He flinched just slightly. I didn't know. I laughed then, a harsh, broken sound. So you accused me to make yourself feel better? He didn't answer. That's when I realized the DNA test had never been about trust. It had been about projection. He had been living a lie, and instead of facing it, he tried to drag me into it with him. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. Who is she? I asked. He hesitated. It doesn't matter. It matters to me, I said. He finally spoke her name, and with it, the last illusion I'd been holding on to fell away because I knew her. Asterisk when he said her name. It landed between us like something solid. For a moment, neither of us moved. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. I stared at him, waiting for my mind to catch up with what my ears had already heard. No, I said finally. You're mistaken. I'm not, he replied. Her name belonged to someone I'd shared meals with. Someone who had sat on my couch, cradling a mug of tea, asking polite questions about the baby. Someone who'd smiled at me with soft eyes and told me I was glowing. She worked with him. Had for years. I'd met her at company barbecues, holiday parties, the occasional dinner when spouses were invited. I remembered the way she laughed too loud, maybe, but warm. The way she always stood just a little too close to him, her hand brushing his arm as she spoke. I had noticed it once. Just once. And then I dismissed it, ashamed of myself for even thinking something so uncharitable. "You've been sleeping with her?" I said slowly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. He nodded. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. That was the phrase he chose. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I hurt you." Just a vague admission that things had gone wrong, as if this were a scheduling error instead of a betrayal that cracked my life open. "How long?" I asked. He rubbed his face with both hands. "About a year." A year. I did the math in my head, my thoughts moving sluggishly, like wading through water. A year meant dinners I ate alone. A year meant missed appointments, distracted conversations, hands that no longer reached for mine in the dark. "Does she know about the baby?" I asked. "Yes." "And she still slept with you?" "Yes." I closed my eyes. I saw her face again, smiling at my baby shower, handing me a small gift bag with a neutral-colored onesie inside. "For when you don't know yet," she'd said cheerfully. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need air," I said. I stepped outside onto the back porch, the cool evening breeze hitting my face. I leaned against the railing, breathing deeply, trying to keep my knees from buckling. The sky was turning that dusky blue that comes just before night fully settles in. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds from an ordinary world that suddenly felt very far away. When I came back inside, he was still at the table. "You accused me," I said quietly. "You watched me cry. You watched me doubt myself. And all the while, you knew?" "I was scared," he said. "So was I replied. "But I didn't betray you." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. That night, he slept on the couch. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my hands resting on my belly, feeling the baby shift and roll as if sensing my unrest. I whispered apologies I wasn't sure I needed to make. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I spent the day moving through the house, touching things, trying to decide what was real and what had been an illusion. Every photograph felt like evidence of a crime I hadn't known was happening. Every smile caught on camera now seemed suspect. Rehearsed at around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from her. "I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back. "No dot," she called anyway. "I never meant to hurt you," she said when I answered, her voice trembling. "It just happened." "Did it just happen for a year?" I asked. "Did it just happen in my house, at my baby shower, while you looked me in the eye and smiled?" She started to cry. "He told me you two were basically over." "He was sleeping in my bed," I said. "He was coming to appointments with me. He was planning a nursery." "I didn't know," she whispered. I hung up. The days that followed were a fog of appointments, conversations, and decisions I never imagined I'd have to make while pregnant. I told my sister first, then my mother. Their reactions were a mix of anger and heartbreak, their voices rising in disbelief as they asked the same question over and over. "How could he do this to you?" "He asked for forgiveness. He cried. He promised to end it. He told me he loved me." I listened, but something inside me had gone quiet. One afternoon, while he was at work, I sat down at the computer and logged into our shared email account. I didn't go looking for messages between them. I didn't need to. What I found instead was worse. There were emails from the lab. Follow-ups. Questions. He had ordered another DNA test. One I hadn't agreed to. One he'd arranged to have done secretly after the baby was born. My hands shook as I scrolled. There were notes he'd written to himself, drafts of messages he'd never sent, calculations about timelines and custody. That's when I understood the bigger lie. He wasn't just questioning paternity. He was planning an exit, a way to leave me without consequence, without guilt, without responsibility. The accusation, the test, the affair, it all led back to that. He hadn't wanted the truth. He wanted an escape. I sat there in the quiet house, the weight of that realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. Outside, a lawnmower droned. Life went on. Inside, I made a decision. I didn't confront him right away. That surprised even me. Instead, I sat with what I'd learned, turning it over in my mind like a stone in my pocket, heavy, impossible to ignore, but oddly grounding. I had spent weeks reacting to his choices, absorbing his fear and his guilt as if they were mine to carry. Now, for the first time since he'd spoken those words in the kitchen, I felt a strange clarity settle in. If he had a plan, then I needed one too. That evening, I cooked dinner like I always did. The familiar motions calmed me, chopping onions, the sizzle of oil in the pan, the soft music playing low from the radio. He came home late, kissed my cheek, and asked how my day had been, as if nothing had changed. Fine, I said. And it was the truth, in a way. I felt steadier than I had in days. Over dinner, he talked about work, about deadlines and office politics. He didn't mention her. He didn't mention the baby. When he finally looked at me and asked if I was okay, his eyes searched my face for signs of something: anger, suspicion, forgiveness. I'm tired, I said. Pregnancy. He nodded, relieved, and went to shower. That night, while he slept, I made a list. It wasn't dramatic. Just names, numbers, documents I knew I'd need. Our bank accounts. The mortgage. My maternity leave paperwork. I emailed myself copies of everything important. I called a lawyer the next morning, a woman my sister had recommended, and scheduled a consultation. Sitting in her office a few days later, my hands folded over my belly, I told her everything. She listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, her expression professional but not cold. You're doing the right thing by preparing, she said when I finished. Especially with a baby on the way. What about the DNA test? I asked, the one he tried to arrange without my consent. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. That's concerning, but it also works in your favor. It shows intent. Intent. The word echoed in my head. I went home that afternoon and waited for him. When he walked through the door, I handed him a printed copy of the emails, his face drained of color. You went through my email? We share the account, I said calmly. You've been planning to test our child without my knowledge. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I was just trying to protect myself. From what? I asked. Responsibility? He sank into a chair. I didn't know how to leave, he said quietly. Everything felt complicated. So you tried to make me the villain, I said. You tried to make it my fault. He didn't deny it. That was the moment something shifted between us for good. Not anger, clarity. I saw him as he was, stripped of excuses. A man who had chosen the easiest path for himself, regardless of the cost to anyone else. I want you to move out, I said. He looked up sharply. What? I want you to pack a bag and leave tonight, I repeated. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on. He argued. He pleaded. He promised therapy, transparency, change. I listened until he ran out of words. I need peace, I said finally. And you can't give me that. He left with a suitcase and a look of stunned disbelief, as if he hadn't quite believed I would follow through. In the weeks that followed, the truth began to ripple outward. His parents called, confused and upset. I told them what I was comfortable sharing. His mother cried. His father was quiet, his voice tight when he apologized, not for his son's actions, but for the pain they'd caused out at work. People noticed his absence. Whispers started. She stopped showing up to company events. Eventually, the story found its way out, as these things always do. Not because I broadcast it, but because lies have a way of collapsing under their own weight. The baby arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Labor was long and exhausting, but when they placed that tiny, warm body on my chest, the world narrowed to just the two of us. I breathed her in the sweet, clean scent of newborn skin and felt something inside me mend. He came to the hospital the next day. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, holding a small bouquet of flowers, his eyes fixed on the baby. "She's beautiful," he said. "She is," I replied. "He has to hold her." I watched closely as he did, his face softening, his shoulders relaxing as if the weight of everything he'd done hadn't fully reached him yet. When he handed her back, I said, "We'll do this the right way. For her." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you." The DNA test he'd secretly planned was never needed. The truth was already known. In the months that followed, the legal processes unfolded quietly. Custody arrangements, financial agreements. I focused on my daughter, on late-night feedings, on the way her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, on the steady rhythm of a new life taking shape. Healing wasn't fast. Some nights, after she fell asleep, I sat in the dim light of the living room and let myself feel everything I'd been too strong to acknowledge during the day. The grief, the anger, the relief. Slowly, though, peace found its way back in. I learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it comes wrapped in doubt, in quiet accusations meant to shift blame and ease guilt. And sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is choosing to see the truth clearly and walk away. Life. After the divorce didn't arrive with a dramatic sense of freedom. It came quietly. In fragments. In the early mornings, when the house was still and my daughter slept against my chest, her breath warm and even. In the afternoons, when I learned how to balance a baby on my hip while answering emails and reheating leftover soup. In the evenings, when I sat alone on the couch, the television on but muted, simply grateful for the absence of tension. I went back to work part-time after my maternity leave ended. My coworkers were gentle with me, careful not to pry, offering help in small, meaningful ways. A cup of coffee left on my desk, an extra set of hands during busy days. Their kindness reminded me that even when one relationship fractures, others can step in to hold you steady. My ex-husband saw our daughter regularly. To his credit, he showed up. He brought diapers, learned how to soothe her when she cried, asked questions about her routines. Watching him with her was complicated. I could see the love there, genuine and tender. It softened some of the sharp edges of my anger, even as it underscored the choices he'd made that led us here. We spoke only about logistics, pickup times, doctor's appointments, daycare. There were no long conversations about the past, no attempts to rewrite history. That boundary became one of my greatest protections. The woman he'd had the affair with transferred to another branch of the company. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship hadn't survived the exposure. I felt no satisfaction in that knowledge, only a quiet confirmation of something I already knew. Foundations built on dishonesty rarely hold. One evening, as I rocked my daughter to sleep, I found myself thinking about the accusation that had started it all. "The baby isn't mine." Those words had cut deeply. Not just because they questioned my fidelity, but because they tried to rewrite my reality. They were meant to shift blame, to create doubt where none belonged. I realized then how often women are asked to prove their innocence, to carry the weight of someone else's wrongdoing simply because it's easier that way. How quickly trust can be weaponized when accountability feels too heavy. Therapy helped. So did time. I learned to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it, to trust my instincts again, to forgive myself for not seeing what I couldn't have known. On my daughter's first birthday, we held a small party in the backyard. Balloons tied to the fence bobbed in the breeze. A lopsided cake sat on the picnic table, its frosting already melting in the summer heat. Friends and family gathered, laughing. Passing the baby from one set of arms to another. My ex-husband arrived on time, carrying a gift and a tentative smile. We exchanged polite hellos. Nothing more. As I watched my daughter smash her tiny hands into the cake. Giggling at the mess she made, I felt something like gratitude wash over me. Not for what had happened, but for what I'd learned, that I was stronger than I'd known, that truth, even when painful, clears a path forward, that my worth had never been up for debate. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, I cleaned up the last of the plates and balloons. I paused in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I chose you, I whispered. And I choose me. The lie that had once threatened to unravel everything had, in the end, revealed exactly what needed to be seen. Not just about him, but about me. Some betrayals break you. Others set you free.